guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to the Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be doing my March wrap up. In March I read 9 books and a total of 4,111 pages. So I'm going to go through my statistics for the month first of all. During March I read 2 2018 releases and the rest were backlist books. Genre-wise, I read 1 middle grade, 3 YA, 2 historical fiction, 1 fantasy and 2 thrillers, so a good mix of genres again. My theme for the month was prize winners, and although a couple of books that I'm going to talk about have won prizes, none of them that I'm going to talk about today I actually read that was part of my TBR, so I kind of failed on that one during the month. And then when it comes to star ratings, I read 2 5-star books, 3 4-star books, 3 3-star books and 1 2-star book. So we're going to jump into all the books I read now in a bit more detail. The first of those is Rooftoppers, and this is by Catherine Rundell, and this was the middle grade book that I read during the month of March. And I picked this up especially because of Krista and Katie's middle grade March readathon. So I wanted to read something that was middle grade during the month of March, and I've had this on my shelf for ages, and I did say at the time when I was picking up my TBR that this has won quite a few prizes. There's like a list of them at the bottom, but it wasn't on my TBR for that reason, so I can't pretend that I read it because it was a prize winner. This tells the story of a little girl, and at the beginning of the book she washes up on the shores of the UK and is picked up by this man who kind of owns this really sort of eccentric house in the countryside, and he kind of takes her in. He doesn't know where her parents are, but he takes her in and he kind of raises her, not as his daughter because she knows that she's not his daughter, but he raises her basically. And then again, this is quite towards the beginning of the book, there's this lady that's kind of been dropping past while, I can't even remember her name, oh Sophie, while Sophie's been growing up and just kind of checking on how she's being brought up and that kind of stuff. And she tells them one day that Sophie can no longer live with, who is it? I don't know, let's call him her stepfather. She has to go to some sort of an orphanage or a foster home or something like that. So obviously she doesn't want to go, so she really wants to go to Paris and try and discover where her mother is. So they kind of try and escape, do escape to Paris, and then the story is about kind of her finding friends on the roofs in Paris. I did kind of enjoy this. I didn't really get what the hype was behind it in terms of like why it had won these prizes. It was quite an adventurous story, but at the same time I kind of saw things in it that had sort of been done before, but also, yeah, I wasn't really that into it, to be honest. Yeah, I get kind of why kids would enjoy this from like an adventure point of view, but it just wasn't for me. So I think I ended up giving that one 3 stars. The next book that I read in March was Children of Blood and Bone, and this is by Tomi Adeyemi, and this is the start of a YA fantasy series with a sort of West African inspiration. Yeah, I've done a full review of this on my channel already, so I'll link that in the cards for you just in case you haven't seen it, and you can hear a few more of my thoughts there. I did really enjoy this. I thought it was a different take on YA fantasy, and definitely one that would open children's eyes up to different cultures and things like that, but also that you get to see different cultures being represented in YA fantasy, which is absolutely fantastic. This is topped the New York bestseller list for a couple of weeks now. The film rights have been optioned for this, and it is the start of a series, so I believe the next book is coming out next year. If you're wondering, you know, should I pick it up, I did really enjoy this. It does have some cliches in it, but I thought it was a really different kind of fresh take on YA fantasy, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Next up in March I finished The Pillars of the Earth, and this is by Ken Follett. I'd been reading this since February, and it was my booktuber recommends pick for February. Katie from Life Between Words recommended this one. It's a chunker. It was, how many pages was it in the end? 1,076 pages. So, but to be honest, if I'd have dedicated more time to it in February, I would have read it quite quickly in February. I would say you could read this within a couple of weeks. Even though it's chunky, it's so readable. So what this basically is an epic historical fiction story about the building of a cathedral, and it's told from multiple perspectives, including the family of a builder who wants to go and build a cathedral, and his name's Tom, and he's going around with his wife and his 2 children looking for work, and it's really desperate times and things like that. So we follow him. We follow a few other characters, and they're just, the richness of the characters in this book was one of the reasons that I kept on reading, and I was so invested in the story. The plot had so many twists and turns. I really liked the bad characters in here. It's kind of strange to say that, but I just hated them so much, and I just wanted to see them or just get their just desserts, and so it was so delicious from that sort of point of view as well. You were reading it and sort of thinking, you know, what's going to happen to these characters. There are some really quite shocking, brutal, gruesome moments in this, so I will say that if you're looking to pick up this book, be prepared for some shocks. There were quite a few moments where I was like, wow, okay. But if you're prepared for that, then you'll be absolutely fine. This is the first book in a trilogy. I picked up the second one about a month ago now, I think. I have it on my shelf, and then I believe the third one, A Column of Fire, has just come out. So it's quite an investment series, because World Without End, the second one, is even bigger than this one. I think it's something like 1,300 pages. But I'm just, yeah, the story is absolutely fabulous. I keep on nagging at my husband to pick this up because I think he will really, really enjoy it. Just the epicness of it and the richness of the characters and the great storytelling in here. It is really, really worth your while, and I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Next up, I was lucky enough to be sent a copy of Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman by Ink Road Publishing, and I read this and absolutely loved it as well. This has got another 5 stars from me. Again, I've put a review up of this on my channel, so you can go and hear a few more of my thoughts. This basically tells the story of Kiko, and she is Japanese American, so her mother is American and her father is Japanese, and her mother and father have recently split up, and she's living with her mother and her 2 brothers who she doesn't really speak to that much. Her mother is a real menace, but also she's kind of desperate to get into this art school called Prism. And at the beginning of the book, we find out that she hasn't got into the art school, and obviously it breaks her heart, but then she goes with her friend Jamie, I think it is, to go and look at some other art schools up and down the coast of California and kind of get away from her mother and things like that. And yeah, there was just so much good commentary in here on anxiety, and just I could relate to Kiko's character so much. So again, if you want to hear a few more of my thoughts, you can go check out my full review of this. Next up on audio, I listened to The Fellowship of the Ring, and this is by J.R.R. Tolkien. So if you don't know, one of my goals in 2018 was to reread the first and the second book and finally get around to reading the third. So I listened to The Fellowship of the Ring. It took me a while to listen to it. Yeah, I think over a month. Sorry, my screen was doing weird things then. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. I didn't particularly enjoy the narration. I can't remember who the narrator is, so I'll put a thing on the screen here with the narrator's name. But his voice was kind of a little bit boring at times. I think it could do with a bit of a fresh update, to be honest. But also, I don't know, I just prefer the movies so much more than the books, and they've obviously changed quite a lot from the film as well. So it was interesting kind of seeing what was left in the movies and what was changed in the movies compared to the books. So it was kind of refreshing from that point of view. Yeah, 3 stars. I was going to kind of just jump into the second book and the third book and kind of do it like that, but I needed a bit of a break, so I'm not doing that at the moment, but I will continue on later in the year. Then on my Kindle I read The Grave Tender, and this is by Eliza Maxwell, and it's described as a thriller, but I wouldn't really say that it's a thriller. I say more it's like a family saga mystery with some sort of thriller aspects to it. So this basically follows a woman called Hadley, and as an adult she's just recently moved back to the town where she grew up as a child, and she's brought her daughter with her. Her husband's just recently passed away. And it switches a little bit between timelines, so there's a lot of stuff obviously about what's going on when she's an adult, and then it switches back to when she was a child to give you a little bit of background to do with her family. It's described as a thriller, but not much happens in the moment, and that's all I'm going to say. If you know that it's not really a thriller, it's more sort of like a family saga mystery, but a bit more than that because it's a bit darker than that, then I think you'll appreciate it a lot more. I think the description could do with a bit of tweaking in that sort of sense. This was really, really dark, and there were some quite shocking moments in it, but I did really, really like the story, and I was rooting for the characters, and yeah, I kind of like the different twists that it took. Yeah, just stuff that you weren't really expecting, to be honest. So I would say if you like thrillers, then definitely this would be one to pick up. If you like kind of dark books, mystery books, then again this would be one to pick up as well. Yeah, and I ended up giving that 4 stars in the end. Next up, I discovered my library's audiobook app this month. I had downloaded it on my phone before, but I couldn't get it to connect to my car, and I just didn't know why. I thought there was something wrong with the app, and yeah, but I think it's my car in the end, and I have switched cars since then. But I downloaded this app called BorrowBox, and it's the app that UK libraries use so that you can borrow ebooks and audiobooks from them. Obviously you can go into the library and borrow physical audiobooks and bring them back, but these are like e-audiobooks, so it's a bit like having an Audible account basically. So I rediscovered it this month. I finished listening to The Fellowship of the Ring, and I needed something else, so I downloaded this app and I was having a little look at all the stuff on there. And obviously they don't have like a massive selection, but they do have a really good selection. So I was kind of reserving some things in that, and then I thought, right, let's just pick one that I can just listen to. So I picked Fierce Kingdoms by Jim Phillips, and this is another thriller, and it follows a mother and a son, and at the beginning of the book they're at a zoo, and they've stopped to sit on this bench. It's nearly zoo closing time, and the two of them are just having this little sweet conversation between the two. He's around 5 or something like that, the son. His name's Lincoln, and I think her name's Joan from what I remember. And then, you know, it's getting late and the zoo's about to close. They're making their way towards the entrance, and then they hear these gunshots, so they have to go and hide basically. And the book is about them going to hide, and kind of how, you know, who the shooters are, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff basically. It would have been good, I think, if it was just a story from the mother's perspective and it just focused on the mother and the son, and perhaps we got the perspective of a couple of other characters who were hiding out around the zoo and things like that. What I didn't like about this book was that we got the perspectives of the shooters, and I just thought it was ridiculous listening to, and maybe it was because I was listening to it as well, because I didn't care for the narration that much, but I got used to it in the end. But listening to the way that these shooters were coming across, it just sounded so false and so cliche. And I just think, personally anyway, and I don't know whether Jim Phillips has got this kind of background or not, but you've got to be a really clever, like, criminal psychologist in order to get into the head of somebody who would make those decisions and and write it well, or you've just got to be a clever writer, and I just didn't think that Jim Phillips managed to pull it off. I thought those bits were a bit unnecessary, to be honest. It was almost like she was making excuses for why they were shooting at these people, and I just didn't think that was necessary. So I didn't really like it from that point of view. There were a few sort of other bits and pieces that I just thought, I don't know. There was a lot of commentary in here about being a mother and about kind of bringing up a small child and that sort of thing, and the experience of that, and what it's like to, I suppose, lose a little bit of your identity when you have children and things like that. And I thought that was really good, and I really did enjoy those moments. And then there were these other moments and I just thought, nah. So I ended up giving that one 2.5 stars. And when I looked this up on Amazon the other day, it's been renamed to just Fierce. So I don't really know why that is. Anyway, so yeah, 2.5 stars. I wouldn't recommend this. I didn't think it was that great. I'm kind of glad that I read it for free, basically. And the last two books that I read were library books, and I've had to take them back already, so I'll just insert pictures on the screen here. So the first of those was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is a YA fantasy novel focused around the fairy world, and it tells the story of God, I can't even remember. I'm terrible with names. Okay, so it focuses around a girl called Jude, and Jude isn't a fairy, she's a mortal, as you know we're referred to. And basically at the beginning of the book it describes how the man that's looking after her, called Maddox, I think it's Maddox, he basically comes into the mortal world and he kills her parents and then takes her sister, her twin sister and her older sister back to the fairy world, where apparently, you know, the older sister belongs. And she's kind of growing up knowing that she doesn't belong, and being kind of picked on for that reason, stuff like that. And then at the beginning of the book there, we're leading up to this new coronation. So the old fairy king has decided to step down and one of his sons is going to take over. So they're all kind of preparing for this coronation. And it's about kind of how she gets pulled into this world with the princes and stuff like that. And I thought it was alright. The story kind of ticked over quite quickly. I wasn't particularly enamoured with the storyline. I'm probably enamoured enough to continue on because this is the start of another series. It was intriguing the way it ended. I did like some of the characters and some of the descriptions of the setting and stuff like that. But I've heard a lot of buzz on BookTube about this book, obviously in the YA community especially. And yeah, I don't know. I gave this one 3.5 stars, so it was alright. And the last book that I finished off in the month of March was Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, and this is by Jamie Ford. And this was my BookTuber recommends pick for the month. So Kerry Ann from Woman vs Books recommended this to me, and this is the one that I picked up during March, and this was absolutely fantastic. And this tells the story of Henry, and Henry is a Chinese American boy. So he was born in America but his parents are from China, and they live in Seattle. And Henry's lived in Seattle all his life, and at the beginning of the book he is an older man and he wanders past this hotel called the Panama Hotel, I think it is. It is called the Panama Hotel, isn't it? Fucking names. And at the beginning of the book he wanders past this hotel called the Panama Hotel, and there's a lot of sort of things happening outside this hotel, and it turns out that the new owner who's renovating the hotel has found a lot of old Japanese kind of belongings in the basement. And it switches between the current timeline where Henry is an older man, his wife just died, and the timeline of when he's around, I think 10 or 11, maybe it's a little bit older than that, maybe an early yeah, 10 or 11 or 12, something kind of along those lines. And this is around the time of World War II, and he meets a Japanese American girl called Kiko who comes to go to his school, and this is around the time when a lot of Japanese people were being put into internment camps in the States because of the stuff that had gone on in Pearl Harbor. And it's about the fact that these Japanese people had to leave Seattle and go to these internment camps, and it's a really beautiful story. It's about Henry and Kiko's relationship and about the sacrifices that people had to make and about the way that America has treated different cultures and things like that. Yeah, and I just thought it was a really beautiful and really interesting. I loved reading about Henry and Kiko's relationship. I loved reading about the history behind that kind of period, and it was really great reading from Henry's point of view. There were some great characters in this book, really great, including this saxophone player, again, whose name just escapes me, but he was such a great character. And I just thought the story was absolutely brilliant. So if you like a bit of historical fiction and stuff with kind of like a cultural kind of twist to it, then I would definitely recommend this, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. So there you go guys, they were all of the books that I read in March. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments below. Have you read any of these and what did you think of them? And what were some of the favourite books that you picked up in March? Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.